Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. If I had known that a simple knock on an ordinary afternoon would echo through the years, I might have set the kettle sooner, cleared the table better, and steadied my heart. But life doesn't RSVP. Sometimes it just arrives, carrying a face you love and the words you didn't know you needed. I was wiping down the kitchen counter, sunlight stretching across the tiles like long ribbons. The house hummed its usual little songs. The clock in the hall, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the kettle beginning its she murmur. Then came the knock. Not hurried, not timid, just 3 calm taps, as if whoever stood outside had decided that patience was a kind of respect. I opened the door, and there he was, my nephew, Daniel, taller than the last time I saw him, shoulders squared the way grown men eventually stand when they've had to carry a few heavy weeks. "Aunt Mara," he said, and the name settled into me like a warm coat. He smiled, but there was a crease between his brows I didn't remember from before. He asked if he could come in. I said yes, of course, and felt a small flutter of worry and wonder. He hadn't called ahead. Surprise can be sweet. It can also be a messenger. He stepped into the living room, and I watched his eyes move over the family photos. There's the one of him at 9, standing in a cardboard pirate ship we built together. There's my sister, his mother, caught mid-laugh, head thrown back, a summer sky behind her like a promise she meant to keep. Daniel's gaze slowed at that picture, and I saw his jaw tighten, then ease, like he was practicing how to let something go without losing it. "Tea?" I asked. "I have lemon. Or mint if I dive far enough into the cupboard." "Lemon sounds perfect," he said, voice gentle but a little hoarse, as though he'd been rehearsing a speech on the drive over, and it had sanded his throat. In the kitchen, the kettle clicked to a boil. I set 2 cups on the table and placed the sugar bowl between us like a referee. We didn't speak for a moment. We just listened to the soft clink of spoon against porcelain, 2 small bells ringing in the quiet. That's when he asked, very carefully, if he could share something. "It's personal," he said, "but I want your permission to say it the way it lives in me." I looked at him. This young man who once scraped his knee on my driveway and cried into my shoulder, who now carried a man's steadiness in his hands, and I nodded. "You can tell me anything, Daniel. I'm here." He exhaled, the kind of breath a person takes when they're deciding to trust the room they're in. "I've been replaying last winter," he said. The hospital, the calls, the way grief makes everything both louder and muffled at the same time. He touched the edge of the saucer. I didn't say something then, and it sat in me like a stone. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a tenderness that can ache. Losing my sister had braided us all into a new shape, and none of us had learned yet how to wear it without chafing. I folded my hands and let the silence be big enough to hold him. He told me about the nights after the funeral when he would drive nowhere in particular, headlights drawing a narrow path through winter fields, the radio low so it wouldn't overrule his thoughts. He told me about angry prayers muttered at red lights, and the way he found himself stopping outside my house more than once, engine idling, wondering if knocking would help or just wake old pain. "I didn't want to bring you my storm," he said, "but I should have. You were part of the sky she loved." I felt my eyes sting. "You don't have to apologize for carrying your weather," I said. "We're family. We hold umbrellas together." He smiled, small and grateful, then grew serious again. "There's more." He glanced toward the hallway where the clock ticked, a calm, patient metronome. "I need to tell you something Mom said to me. Something about you. It's why I'm here today. I think it might change how you remember a few things." A quiet settled between us that wasn't empty at all. It was full of doors about to open. I watched the steam curl from his cup like a ribbon writing a word I couldn't yet read. Outside, a breeze collected the wind chimes and played a few delicate notes, as if the house itself was ready to listen. "Take your time," I told him. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, cleared his throat, and rested his palms on the table, steadying himself. "Mom told me," he began, voice soft but sure, "that when I was little, and she was struggling more than any of us knew, you—" He paused, searching for the exact shape of the memory. "You were the reason we made it through a winter that should have broken us. She said there was something you did, something you never took credit for. And there's a letter." I felt the room tilt, not in fear, but in recognition, the way a melody returns after years, and you realize you've been humming it, absent-mindedly, all along. "A letter?" I asked, the word coming out like a thread I was almost afraid to pull. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and held my gaze. "I brought it," he said. "And there's one more thing she told me to say," exactly as she said it. That's the part that's been echoing in my head. He placed the folded envelope on the table between us, the paper soft at the edges, like it had been carried close to warmth for a very long time. Daniel's fingers lingered on the envelope for a moment, as though even the act of letting go carried weight. I could see how much it cost him to bring it here, to hand me something his mother had safeguarded for years. My hand trembled slightly as I reached across the table, not because of fear, but because of the sudden closeness of the past, folded neatly in cream paper. The envelope felt fragile, its edges worn soft, but it radiated a strange warmth, as if it had been held often, carried in pockets, perhaps even pressed against a heartbeat. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked at Daniel. His face, though grown, still carried the same curve at his cheek when he used to grin as a boy. Now there was something else there too, the steady resolve of someone who had been entrusted with truth. "What did she ask you to say?" I asked quietly. His eyes flickered, as if replaying his mother's voice. "She said, 'Tell your aunt she was my shelter when the storm came.' Tell her I never forgot." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I felt my throat tighten in response. Those were words my sister had never spoken directly to me. And now, hearing them through Daniel, they felt both foreign and deeply familiar, like the echo of a prayer I hadn't realized I'd been whispering. I traced the fold of the envelope with my thumb before opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly faded but steady, her familiar script looping across the page. The room seemed to hold its breath as I began to read. Her words flowed like a river I thought had dried years ago. She wrote of nights when despair pressed close, when bills piled high, and when the silence of worry weighed heavier than words could carry. She wrote of how I had stepped in quietly, buying groceries without asking, keeping Daniel overnight when she needed rest, paying a heating bill in the dead of winter, and never taking credit. "I wanted to tell you in person," the letter read, "but I was afraid gratitude might sound like weakness. So I kept it here, waiting for the right moment. If you're reading this now, then I trust Daniel with my truth. You saved us, Mara. Not in ways the world sees, but in the ways that mattered most." The paper blurred as my eyes filled. I pressed my hand against my lips, not to stifle the sob, but to give it a place to rest. Across the table, Daniel watched me with quiet compassion, his own eyes shining. "I never knew she wrote this," I whispered. "I never knew she carried it." "She told me," Daniel said gently, "that she wanted me to deliver it if she couldn't find the courage herself. And when the time came, she said it was more than just about the past. It was about the bond we have now." That you were the one I could always turn to, even if I was late in doing it. The kettle clicked again in the background, a simple household reminder that life goes on. But something in me had shifted. The grief I carried for my sister had always been heavy with unanswered questions, with silences that felt too wide to cross. Now, with her words in my hands, those silences felt less like emptiness and more like space she had trusted me to fill. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "There's something else I need to ask you," he said, his voice more steady now. "Not about the past, but about what comes next." I folded the letter carefully, placing it back on the table between us, as if it were a bridge we could both walk across. "Go on," I said. "I'm listening." Daniel didn't speak right away. He sat there, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup, as though he was sketching invisible circles to gather his courage. The weight of his silence wasn't heavy. It was deliberate, like he was choosing words that could hold both his mother's memory and his own heart without breaking either. Finally, he looked up, his eyes steady on mine. "I've been carrying this question for months," he said, "and I couldn't bring myself to ask anyone else. Mom always told me you had a way of seeing the truth without judgment. I need that now." I folded my hands together, grounding myself in the moment. The letter still lay between us, and I could almost feel my sister's presence there, urging me to listen with the same patience she once leaned on. "What is it, Daniel?" I asked gently. He leaned back, exhaling like someone bracing for cold water. "I don't know who I am without her. I don't know how to carry the parts of her that live in me without feeling like I'm pretending. She believed in me, but I'm not sure I've earned that belief." And his voice caught, then steadied. "I wonder if you ever felt that way too. Like you were expected to be strong, but inside you weren't sure you could keep holding it together." His honesty cut through me, not because it hurt, but because it was so raw. I saw in him the same vulnerable courage I'd once seen in his mother, how she would admit her fears in the dark, but still wake each morning and face the day. I reached across the table and rested my hand over his. His fingers twitched, then stilled, accepting the comfort. "Yes," I said softly, "more times than I can count. After she was gone, I felt like every step was too heavy, like grief had stolen the map and I was supposed to keep walking anyway. But here's the truth, Daniel. Strength isn't never falling apart. It's learning how to gather yourself back together, piece by piece, even if it takes years." He swallowed hard, blinking quickly. "So you don't think I'm failing? That I'm weak?" "Not for a moment," I replied. "You're grieving. And grief has its own language. It trips you, confuses you, makes you doubt. But it also teaches you. It teaches you who you can lean on, and it teaches you that love doesn't end just because someone's gone." The words seemed to sink into him slowly, like rain soaking into dry earth. He nodded, not fast, but thoughtfully, and I could almost see the tension loosening in his shoulders. After a while he asked if we could take a walk. The late afternoon sun was bending low, pouring golden light across the street. We stepped outside, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and the neighbor's wood smoke. As we walked side by side, Daniel kept close, his silence no longer weighted but companionable. At one point, he stopped and looked at me. "Can I tell you the exact words Mom said, the ones that keep echoing in my head? I think I'm finally ready." I nodded, my heart tightening in anticipation. "She told me," he said slowly, carefully, "that you were the anchor she tied herself to when the waters rose too high. She said, 'If I don't make it through the storm, tell your aunt that she was my lighthouse.'" His voice wavered on the last word, and he pressed a fist lightly to his chest, as if to steady himself. For a moment, the world around us blurred, the hum of passing cars, the rustle of trees, even the warmth of the sun. All I could hear were those words, sharp and tender, carrying across time. Lighthouse. It wasn't a word I had ever thought of for myself, but in her voice, it fit. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't only from sorrow. They were from the strange comfort of being seen, even from beyond the years. I reached for Daniel's hand, and he let me hold it. "Then we'll keep that light burning together," I said. He squeezed my hand, a small but certain gesture. "That's what I hoped you'd say." We walked the rest of the way in silence, but it was no longer the silence of loss. It was the silence of two people carrying the same flame, knowing it would not go out as long as they carried it side by side. The evening had settled by the time we returned to the house. The sky stretched wide, brushed in shades of purple and gold, and the crickets had already begun their quiet chorus. Inside, the living room felt softer somehow, as if the letter on the table had drawn a line between what had been and what could now begin. Daniel sat back down, leaning into the chair as though he had finally laid down a burden he carried too long. I joined him, the envelope resting between us like a bridge. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just let the stillness be what it was, gentle, not empty. I thought of my sister, of her laughter that used to roll through this very room, and I realized something. Though she was gone, her voice hadn't vanished. It lived in him, in me, in the spaces we were brave enough to share. Daniel cleared his throat. "I was scared of coming here," he admitted. "I thought maybe I'd upset you, or bring back pain you'd worked so hard to bury." I shook my head slowly. Pain doesn't disappear when it's buried. It waits. And sometimes what we call pain is really love that has nowhere to go. You didn't hurt me, Daniel. You gave me somewhere to set mine down. His shoulders lifted, then dropped in relief. I think that's what I needed too. Somewhere to set it down. I reached across, taking his hand the way I had so many years ago, when he was just a boy afraid of the dark. You don't have to carry it alone. You never did. We've both lost, but we've both kept something too, the bond she left us. That's a gift we can still choose to honor. His eyes softened, and I saw gratitude there, not loud or showy, but steady, like the quiet trust between two people who know they've been tested and found each other still standing. "Then let's honor it together," he said, "not just by remembering her, but by being there for each other now. I don't want to disappear back into silence again." Squeezed his hand. "You won't. My door will always be open to you. Not because of what your mother asked, but because you're mine to love too. Nephew, family, friend, whatever name fits that day. You're part of me." The clock in the hallway chimed, its sound both grounding and timeless. Daniel smiled faintly. Mom would have liked that. She'd want us to keep building, not just looking back. We sat together until the night deepened, sharing memories, small laughter, and even quiet tears. Each story was a thread, and before long, I realized we were weaving something new, a fabric not of grief alone, but of resilience and love that could stretch beyond absence. When he finally rose to leave, the letter tucked safely back into the envelope, he paused at the door. "Her words may echo in me," he said, "but they live in you. And now they'll keep living in us both." I stood in the doorway, watching him walk into the night, his figure framed by the glow of the streetlights. My heart ached, yes, but it also felt fuller than it had in years. My sister's voice had reached me through him, and in doing so, had left me with something I thought I'd lost: hope. As the door closed and the quiet returned, I pressed my hand against my chest and whispered into the stillness, "Thank you." Not just to her, but to him, to the moment, to the reminder that even when life surprises us with sorrow, it can just as unexpectedly gift us with connection. And in that quiet, I understood. The echoes in my heart weren't just hers anymore. They were ours, and they would guide us forward.